Well, that'll give you kind of an idea where I'm at. You don't have to see me. Sometimes it's probably better you don't. I'm not always the prettiest person. I'm just going to spit knowledge and see how it goes. I think there's good reason to believe Sargon of Akkad, the Akkadians, however you want to put it. It's what the Scorpion King was. He was an Akkadian. The Rock in the movie The Scorpion King. Um, Sargon of Akkad fits the description of the biblical Nimrod in a lot of ways. He rose to power quickly, kind of came out of nowhere. He is descended, in the secular accounts, he is descended from the city of Cush, which it actually was called Kish. Sargon of Akkad, that is, the biblical Nimrod. He was Cush begat Nimrod. So does begat mean like he was actually his father? Most people assume that, but I think it's interesting how in the list of Cush's sons, Nimrod is not actually part of the list, but after the list of his sons, it says Cush begat Nimrod, like separate from the list of his sons. Why would it have him separate? So anyway, I think it may just be saying he did descend maybe from the line of Cush, or maybe just from the city that was named after him. Anyway, there's some real interesting things about Sargon. There were two Sargons. The second one came like 1,500 years later. He was a Neo-Assyrian ruler. He was not half the leader that Sargon of Akkad was. He's legend in his own right, a lot like Nebuchadnezzar. These two probably will go down in history as the baddest Chaldean emperors, land of Shinar kings. It's also said that when the four kings fought the five in Genesis, and Abraham went and rescued Lot, the one of the kings, Ramphel or something, that was actually Nimrod. Nimrod was a title; it wasn't his name. But I think the same thing is true for Sargon. I think Sargon was also a title. Fuck. Um, so anyway, one thing that if you anybody that's ever like really studied about the Antichrist, you know, the man of sin, the last world emperor, you know, that which was is that which shall be. A lot of people think it will be a reincarnated Nimrod, because if you know anything about like Nephilim research and Rephaim, that in the original Hebrew and Isaiah, it talks how the Rephaim spirits don't, and it says this in Enoch too. They don't have, they're like, part of their judgment is that they will roam the earth until Judgment Day as spirits, and they'll always like be seeking rest or food or shelter or a place, water, the lust, the thirst, the hunger, like, but they can never satisfy these desires and cravings, because that's what they went after in their life. And the fact that they are of a spiritual, half earthly origins, they are kind of like eternal beings, which on the flip side of that coin, they're eternal on earth without a body, because their body kind of, faded away, or, they were killed, or whatever the case was. But so the point is, Nimrod was called Ha-Gibarim, mighty one, and that is a term often used for, giants, which were, if they were giant, then they were hybrid bloodline, or Nephilim. Nephilim was before the flood, Rephaim was after the flood. So if that was the case, and also a lot of people think that Nimrod is also like Osiris and Marduk and Baal, and all these are like names of Nimrod. I don't know. I used to think that. I used to be somebody that thought Nimrod would be the Antichrist would be a resurrected Nimrod. I do not necessarily think that anymore. I don't discount it, but there are a lot of similarities in what the Bible says about the Antichrist and what he's going to do, and what Nimrod, already did, and also the case being for Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad was not of a kingly lineage. That is what it says about the Antichrist. He will not come from royal descent. Also, one of the most interesting things that that you can like make a comparison about these two, Sargon and Nimrod, is that in the Bible it says the Antichrist will declare himself God, but he will also honor, like, I don't know if this is maybe all at the same time or maybe separate timing, like maybe he's at first given homage to a god, and then he declares himself to be even above that god. But it says both. It says he declares himself as God. That's the abomination of desolation, and he'll sit in the temple and declare himself as God. But it also says that, like, I think when he comes on the scene, is this kind of what it's saying, he will honor a god of forces or fortresses. I think the translators with that weren't sure which way to go, so I've seen both words used in that translation. Also, he will understand dark sentences. This will definitely have to do with your Babylonian mysteries and occultic knowledge. Nimrod was the father of the occult. I mean, really, the fallen angels were, but I mean, he was very instrumental in, spreading occultic, the occultic kingdom. Anyway, also, so when you look at it says, honoring a god of like forces or fortresses. This has to do with like war and battle and conquest. Um, this guy did, and the Antichrist, Sargon, Nimrod, and Antichrist. I guess we can say all three of them. There's no guarantees that they're all the same person, and there's no guarantees that they're not. It's kind of split down the middle in some areas, but they all came to power through like conquest, and the Antichrist in Revelation says he goes forth conquering and to conquer. That's going to be his trademark, his signature on kind of planet Earth when he shows up. Is he's just gonna it's gonna be like a blitzkrieg, lightning war type deal. Like he's just gonna quickly take over. He will take over very fast, and that's a lot of people thought Hitler was going to be the Antichrist because how he went, conquering all the European nations as fast as he did. So anyway, the tower. I'm not sure about this, but I have, there's a theory that it sounds okay. Like the Tower of Babel was a temple that was going to be built to a god, and that's something that also says in Daniel about the Antichrist is he'll honor this god, but it will be a foreign god. It will be a new god, a god that his fathers knew not, and he will not honor, the god that regards the desire of women or something like that. And there's a couple different meanings behind that. I won't even touch on that right this second, but might come back to it. But Sargon of Akkad actually introduced the worship of a god. I mean, this is identical to what it says the Antichrist will do. And I'm not sure, maybe it's, saying it's going to happen more than once. But, he introduced the worship of this god, and nobody knew who this god was. He introduced this god, and then after Sargon and his descendants were gone, I think it was less than 1,000 years of the cult of this god was on the scene, and made to be the supreme deity over all the pantheon of Samaria and Chaldeans and Akkadians and all that, and he is above all those, and he was actually given this power by Enlil, and this is also very similar to what it says in the Bible about the Antichrist or the beast being, given his authority and his seat by the dragon. And Enlil is kind of the Sumerian, like Satan or, Lucifer, whatever. When you get into other ancient cultures and their gods, it can get real confusing. A lot of times you have 5 different gods in the same culture they're all Satan or something. It can just be very tricky trying to nail the hammer or hit the nail on the head with the hammer on a lot of these gods and whatnot. But so let me get to it. The name of this god, and I've never heard anybody talk about this. Never. I came across this information, just that's what I do. I dig. But the name of this god was Elaba. I do think through etymology, long story short, I think Elaba is likely the origin of Allah. Allah came from worship of Baal, and Baal came from worship of the Moabite god. The Moabites called him Hubal, Hubal. I also think there are some etymology connections between Hubal and the 2 twin boys that are born. Lamech was their dad, the evil line of Cain, not Lamech, Noah's dad. Line of Cain. There's a Lamech who takes 2 wives, Ada and Zillah. I do believe Ada and Zillah are female fallen angels. I think this is one of the reasons that Cain's line is considered a serpent seed. A lot of people think that he was the product of Eve and the serpent mating or whatever, but that's not true. The Bible doesn't say that, and if that was the case, then Abel would have to be a serpent seed too, and that can't be the case because Abel's line was supposed to be the original line the Messiah would come from, and that's why Seth took his place after Abel died, and they Adam knew his wife again, and Seth was born, and so the line of the Messiah, in the Bible traces that lineage from Seth. However, the line of Cain is mentioned, but it doesn't trace it, the whole way. It just gives you the first, few generations, and it does that because it's showing some very important points that are overlooked regularly. But I'm not going to get on that right now. I'll talk about that in my other videos. I think I'm probably one of the first ones to, say this, and this is a theory that I'm going to stick with. I think it's backed. I think it's backed up by Scripture. I think it's backed up by the Book of Enoch. I think there are very good minds out there that have almost kind of uncovered this fact, but they just couldn't quite put their finger on it. And I don't want to brag or say I did anything special, but I do think that this is one of the things I'm supposed to put out there and contribute to the prophecy / eschatology, world. I was studying about the Nephilim long before it was a normal YouTube video topic, long before YouTube even. I was reading Revelation commentaries in the 5th grade. I probably read 4 or 5 by the time I was graduated middle school. The book of Revelation is still just as confusing now as it was when I was younger, but I can tell you this, I learned a whole lot about the Bible through the book of Revelation, because if you want to know what Revelation and all the symbolisms in Revelation means, then you have to know what history and culture was like back then, and just what the Old Testament talks about and a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are talked about in Revelation that are also talked about in the Old Testament books. For example, Daniel sees this beast that comes up out of the sea, and Daniel is looking into the future. However, when John sees this beast come up out of the sea, he is looking in the past, because it is the same beast that Daniel saw. They are both seeing the same beast. However, it's interesting how Daniel never mentions the woman. But when John sees the beast, he sees the woman who is riding the beast. And, also, John sees the dragon who the beast is emulated after, or a copy, if you will, just disguised, as a beast empire. And I think there are so many meanings, and like there's when you're talking about some depth now. I mean, there's a lot of depth to like the meanings of Revelation. Um, how do you write down eternal concepts? Well, Revelation is a pretty good way of going about it. People just absolutely boggle my mind. I see this all the time. Somebody will be complaining about the Bible and say it was written by men. Well, what book wasn't written by man? That's what makes it all the more fascinating and astonishing that, like, it is as accurate as it is. Look, people will believe somebody like Zechariah Stitchin, who said he taught himself how to read ancient Sumerian, but there isn't a ancient Near Eastern scholar on planet Earth that will agree with Zechariah Stitchin's translations or put any faith or trust in his work. You won't hear people talking about those guys. The Anunnaki are not the Nephilim, or if anything, they may be fallen angels, but Anunnaki was an Akkadian term, and if the Anunnaki were really important gods, there would have been temples dedicated to them. There would have been art that portrayed them. There would have been cults that were dedicated to the worship of them, rituals that would have been done honoring the Anunnaki gods. They are only in literary writings. And there is nowhere in any ancient Sumerian tablets, and many thousands, over 10,000, were discovered in the 1800s, 1840s, I believe, when the temple at Ur, the ziggurat, one of the oldest ones ever uncovered, when it was, discovered, and there were about 10,000 some odd tablets discovered with it. Dictionaries that had the meanings of words, and I promise you that none of Zachariah Stitchin's work agrees. His translations agree with the actual dictionaries that we can look up. You can look up yourself online. If you want to do that, just find a guy named Michael Heiser. He's dead now, but he'll tell you all about it. Just look up Michael Heiser, Sumerian tablets. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the Anunnaki, the problem is that is a very provocative term, and you got shows like Ancient Aliens that really promote this idea that you got these gods that really are just aliens from other planets. But either way, I mean, what difference does it make? But like in all reality, if they were anything, they would be the corrupt gods that God assigned over the nations. There were 72 of them. If anything, they would be those, but I won't even give it that, because in ancient Sumerian literature, the Anunnaki are sometimes major gods, sometimes they are minor gods. They are never the same gods. They are never the same amount of gods. It's really just a group of gods, and there is no rhyme or reason to their order or rank or their jobs. Like I said, they were not worshipped at all as a group. There were no temples to that, nothing. As far as actual archaeological, discoveries and evidence goes, that can prove anything that Zechariah Sitchin claimed in his basically fiction stories that so many people base their theories and their knowledge on is his work, whenever his work is refuted easily. And I'm not trying to just, bash this guy, but this is no different than L. Ron Hubbard being a science fiction writer and starting a religion based on fiction, or Joseph Smith starting a religion that's, again, based on fiction, and it's all about the aliens from the skies. Well, they came from underneath our feet, not the skies. That's the deception, too. That's all I got to say.